Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Let's start this meeting, and by first handing it over to Gigi, our President and CEO, to kick things off. Gigi.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Because we have an exciting morning planned for all of you, meeting our county executive candidates, it is my honor to introduce our chairman of the board, Lowell Yoder. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our County Executives Forum hosted by Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. And I think it's just one of the real values that the Chamber can bring, that all three of these folks, and Brian did a great job of pulling them all together for this. But we are pleased to be hosting the three of the top county executive candidates. And joining us today will be the incumbent county executive, Marc Elrich, Councilmember Hans Riemer, and David Blair. And we will ask each candidate the same questions about a range of priority issues. We also want to hear from each candidate about their vision for Montgomery County. And if there's time, we also hope to engage each candidate in some Q&A. So be ready with some questions if time's permitting. And it's vital that we stay on time. So we want to respect your time and the candidate's time. The first candidate that we are hosting is David Blair, who will be on at 8:45. Following Mr. Blair is Councilmember Riemer, who will be on at 9:20. Following Councilmember Riemer is County Executive Elrich, who will join at 9:55. Each candidate will have 30 minutes with us, followed by a 5-minute break between candidates. And Brian shared via email a link to each candidate's bio. So we will skip introducing each of our guests. In the interest of time, we will also skip introductions of board members. To help the candidate identify you, we do ask that if you are able to, please put your name and organization in your Zoom box. So Brian, how do members do that?
To do that, the way I do it is I click on those three little dots up in the upper right-hand corner. And then there is, at the very bottom of that menu, is rename. And you can rename, and I think it's just for this meeting, rename yourself there.
Very good. So Brian, over to you.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'm letting in Mr. Blair and Mr. Blair's campaign manager, Aaron, or a campaign assistant as well, Aaron. And I hand it over to you, Mr. Chair, to take it away. I see Mr. Blair is on.
So David, thank you for joining the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce Board this morning for this County Executives Forum. We will make sure we stop promptly at 9:15 a.m. as we know you have a busy day ahead. To get things rolling, it is my pleasure to introduce Leslie Ford Weber, our immediate past chair and chair of the Chamber's Legislative Affairs Committee, to moderate the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Lowell. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us this morning. And thank again to our fellow board members. As folks come on, we will not have them introduce themselves, but send them reminders to try and put their company names behind so that you have a sense of who's on with us today. We're going to ask you a few questions about issues that are important to the business community specifically, and we are planning to ask the same questions to all three candidates that we're talking with this morning. And then if there's some time at the end, we will allow for some Q&A from our participants. So if everybody's ready, our first question is really wide-ranging and more general for you. And tell us about your vision for Montgomery County. And if you think about a legacy in 4 years from now, how will you know that you've succeeded?
Well, good morning. Thank you, Leslie. Good morning to everybody. It's great to see you today. As I think about Montgomery County, so I grew up here. I grew up in the Rockville area, and there's no doubt that I was blessed to grow up here. I mean, it's a phenomenal county, right? With historically our great schools, our wide open places, and the values that we have here in Montgomery County. My mom was a public school teacher, and she used to say to me, David, as when a door opens up for you, it's your duty to reach back and pull the next person through. And I think that really epitomizes the values that we have here in Montgomery County. And I was fortunate from a business perspective that I had some success. And so a door did open up for me, and I've been able to give back. And 10 years ago, we sold that business. And for the past 10 years, my wife and I have really been committed to working with nonprofit advocacy organizations to move the county forward, because we could clearly tell that it was slipping. And when I say that, whether it's our schools that used to be some of the best in the country, you certainly know what's going on with the business environment, how we have less businesses here than we did a decade ago. We're losing our high-paying jobs. Even transportation solutions, environmental solutions, we're being lapped by surrounding jurisdictions. And so I ran 4 years ago. I lost by 77 votes. I'm all in again. It's been exciting. I've been on the campaign trail for 16 months. But while we have these challenges, I'm incredibly optimistic about our future. And this will get to your question about my legacy, my vision. Because while I'm from Montgomery County, we've actually attracted the best and brightest from around the country, from around the world live here. And it's unbelievable when you run for office, how you get to meet with everybody. You wouldn't believe the talent is here. Like there's actually not a problem that we don't have an expert that could actually solve it. So we have incredible talent here. And despite some of the challenges from a financial perspective, we're still one of the wealthiest counties in the country. There's 3,100 counties in the United States. We're the 17th most wealthiest by household income. So we're top 1/10 of 1%. So we're talented, we have the money, and yet we're falling behind because we're missing executive leadership. And executive leadership is all about surrounding yourself with top talent, right? It's making sure that every one of our department heads is the best and the brightest. It's setting aspirational goals. It's removing obstacles. It's providing whatever resources they need, and it's holding them accountable. Because in Montgomery County, we talk a good game about everything, but yeah, we just tend to study it. We have commissions, pilots, work groups, you name it, but we don't actually do it. So when I think about my vision and legacy, it's turning this county around. So it's an attitude. It's going to be the brand of Montgomery County, right? So I want to see that we create 1,000 new businesses are started here in my first term. I want to build a 5,000 seat arena so that our high school kids don't need to go to DC for their graduations. I want to ensure that 100% of the kids that are graduating from our schools are either ready to go to college or we've trained them in a career. We're going to triple our solar power. And I could go on and on, but as I think about where Montgomery County should be, we should be leading not just the region in all of these areas, right? We should be leading the country. And I know we can do that. And I want to be much more aspirational than what I've seen us do here historically. So I'll stop there, Leslie. I apologize if I rambled on a little bit, but that's kind of how I think about my legacy is that big vision.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. You mentioned transportation solutions as you were speaking just on that question. And so we do have a very specific question about one of our major transportation issues, which is the widening of I-495 and 270, the American Legion Bridge project. There's a record of decision expected to be released by the federal government on August 5th. And we want to know generally about your position on the whole project, but also if that record of decision is favorable toward the project, would you plan as county executive to challenge the decision or to be supportive of it?
I am very much in favor of addressing the bridge and the widening of 270. We have to do this. And if you think the bottleneck is bad now, Virginia's already started building their managed lanes on the other side of the river. I mean, just imagine how bad it's going to be a few years from now. So we've got to get this done. I will not oppose it. And it's not just from a transportation perspective. It's not just that, right? It's everything about fixing our ride-on bus system. Our ridership on ride-on bus dropped 10% or 25% in the 10 years up before the pandemic. Just think about how crazy that is. And we're spending more money on it because we haven't reimagined our bus routes. We're buying buses like it's 1999. Everyone loves bus rapid transit, right? We've built 14 miles in 14 years. I mean, at that, you don't need a calculator to figure out that we'll never get there with the pace we're going. to be much more aggressive about investing in new technologies. Like there's adaptive traffic light systems now that are available. And I think about our north-south challenges that we have. Like how cool would it be if we could get adaptive traffic light systems all along 355, right? To help alleviate some of that congestion off the 270. So I'm very much, Leslie, I'm very much in favor of the 495 and 270 projects, would not oppose those. And there's many other things that we can be doing right away to help relieve congestion.
I think we might want to hear a little bit about that as we go along. I will proceed to the questions we had planned,
Sure.
But let's come back to transportation because I think that's interesting to hear more what you have in mind. Sort of the last specific question that we wanted to talk to you about is really coming back to the economic issues. You've already mentioned wanting new business starts, that we're falling behind, our high school graduates being career and college ready. And that's important to I think our board members would tell you that the attraction and retention of all those brilliant experts that you mentioned in your opening is really our number one challenge. But certainly we need to have an economy that is sustainable also. So what thoughts have you had about specific policies and initiatives you might implement as county executive that would improve the labor market specifically in our county, but really the entire economic vitality?
Well, and this is critical, right? And so when you start to kind of peel back the onion, you say, okay, why are we facing the challenges that we are? Because we're losing our tax base, right? And the numbers are staggering. Over the past 10 years, the net tax migration out of Montgomery County has been $5.2 billion. So said another way, if you add up W-2s that are coming in and you subtract W-2s that are leaving, we have a deficit of $5 billion. And so that's killing us because it's those good paying jobs. We've lost 35% of our IT jobs in the past 10 years. These are jobs that pay $125,000 a year. And there was a saying in a Catholic hospital system that I used to work with, and they used to say, no margin, no mission. Meaning if you don't focus on the bottom line, you can't pursue your mission. And that's true in Montgomery County, that we can't do all the services that we so value. We can't support if we're not watching our bottom line, which in this case is making sure we have a flourishing business environment. And when I started my company here in Montgomery County many years ago, I didn't have a perspective of how it was to do business in Montgomery County. But over 15 years, when we had offices in 30 different states and thousands of employees, I realized, wow, Montgomery County is the most difficult place to do business. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And it wasn't one thing, it was everything. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to radically support the businesses that are here today. And I've actually put forth a business bill of rights, and it talks about everything from permitting to inspections, access to capital. We have these programs in Montgomery County. We can provide capital to small businesses. Nobody can figure out how to get it. And not like it's incredibly challenging to get capital. Procurement, of the $1 billion or so that the county spends that could be spent locally, only 12% is. I've been part of all kinds of procurement. I've seen good procurement, bad procurement. You've got to be incredibly proactive, right? So that if it's almost like you go through your accounts payable ledger and figure out where you're spending the money. And if it's not local, someone needs to go find a local business, because so many times these small businesses just don't know. I got a survey, I guess it was last year from the county. It was a paper survey. It was made by a company in Denver. Tell me that we don't have a company in Montgomery County that can do a written survey, right? So we've got to be radical about supporting local businesses, procurement. If you come to our campaign offices, we have a huge wall that has all Montgomery County made products and services, because there needs to be a level of pride to buying local. So it's not just the government buying local or our schools buying local. It's got to be all of us, right? That we want to buy local. So big, huge buy local. So we're going to radically support the businesses that are here today. And then I want to leverage what we have. So and I want to be a mile deep in 7 different areas, not an inch wide and a mile across. It's all on my website, but I'll just give you a couple things. So, life sciences is an easy one because I'm sure most everyone will talk about that. Hospitality. Marriott's been here for 100 years. And so the number of spinoffs, and I've had conversations with the leaderships in our major hotel systems. We could be the hospitality startup capital of the country here. Entrepreneurship. This is unbelievable. So Montgomery County, 1/3 of our residents were born outside the United States. think how entrepreneurial that is, right? That someone's had to learn a new language, perhaps a new culture, a new system. And yet we're lagging the region in new business like that. We're like, you'd think, I mean, how in the world could you create policies that would thwart the entrepreneurship spirit of Montgomery County? Well, we figured out how to do it, didn't we? So we got to undo that. So I would put entrepreneurship programs in our high schools so that so we got to start young, right? We got to figure out how to support. I actually opened up one at the University of Shady Grove after I lost the election last time. I think about Silver Spring and how that should really be a destination and highlighting our arts and entertainment. I've already had conversations with philanthropists about, I don't know if you're familiar with Blair Jessup Park, but it's 14 acres right in the middle of Silver Spring. And we're going to make that a destination. It's going to be a fabulous art facility because we need people coming to Silver Spring because that needs to be thriving. And I'll stop there, Leslie, but it's basically, if you think about my economic development plan, it's a mile deep and 7 verticals. But let me comment specifically because you asked a question about labor. And this is another interesting thing about when you run for office, you get a really broad perspective. And it's crazy on one hand, everybody that CEOs that I meet with, David, we're desperate to hire, right? And it could be anything. It could be tech jobs, healthcare jobs. They need jobs, right? Of course, the trades. On the other hand, when I'm meeting with the nonprofit community, they're continually saying, David, we need living wages. Like these people are working minimum wage jobs. And I think the unique job that the county executive can play is really connecting those dots. And so let me be specific because I love like paid apprenticeship programs. So like at Montgomery College, we have a great auto tech unit and they train young men and women to become auto techs. And this isn't changing the oil anymore. These are computer jobs. And they pay $50,000 to $60,000 a year after 2 years of this apprenticeship program. We only have 40 individuals in the entire program. We have 700,000 cars in Montgomery County, and we have 40 people learning to be auto techs, right? So the county executive needs to do a much better job of connecting the dots between the school from MCPS, right? These are we're going to start in the 10th grade, right? And this is well documented. 10th grade, when you enter your 10th grade year, you're going to start to get on a path, right? Whether you want to do a 4-year school, whether you want to get a certificate. And we're going to make sure that when you graduate from high school, you're either ready to earn a living wage or you're ready to go to college. Because today that's not the case. And it's shocking, the statistics. So I'll just ramble for one more moment. So this month, 12,000 of our high school students completed their senior year, okay, 12,000. 3,000 aren't trained in a career and they can't pass their college entrance exam requirements. That's been going on for decades. So think how we've let society down. Like, what are we doing? We've had these kids for 12 years and we're basically saying, congratulations, now you can go work minimum wage jobs. And so we've got to stop that. So I think one of the big parts of my job is going to be making sure that we have that talent pool ready for the businesses. So anyways, I'll stop there, Leslie.
No, that's not a great, let me follow up a little bit because one of the things that your predecessors have said repeatedly over the years is that, I don't manage the schools. I'm not the school superintendent. So how do you plan to approach, and same thing happens at the council as well, but as county executive, what do you see your role in working with MCPS?
Well, so I lose all energy when I hear our county executives say that. And they actually say it about everything. I don't control parks and planning. I don't control the school. I don't control Annapolis, you name it, right? Like I've heard our county executives say, like for White Oak, what do you expect me to do? I don't own the land. Okay, so let's talk about what real leadership is. So actually real leadership is getting people to do things when you actually don't have direct control, right? It's easy to tell people to do stuff that work for you, and they sometimes do it. Oh, how about your kids? It's easy to tell your kids what to do. Go brush your teeth, put your pajamas on, right? But real leadership is when you don't. And so as it relates specifically to the school, one, they submit the budget to us and we approve the budget. I'm not going to wait till February to start working on the school budget. We're going to do it in September, October. This doesn't have to be such an adversarial relationship because I know that there's things that are important to the school that they want to put in their budget. There's things that are important to me. Like I mentioned entrepreneurship programs, right? And so they could just say, no, we're not doing it, right? Well, I could say, I'm going to say, listen, if you want me to continue to fund this, I need to get this business environment going. Like one thing I want them to do, buy local. This is crazy. I'm friends with a lady who has a salad dressing company. One of her biggest clients is DC Public Schools. She's a Montgomery County business. Biggest client is DC Public Schools. Montgomery County won't buy her salad dressing. Like, how nutty is that? So I'm going to start early working with the board and the superintendent about what our priorities are, right? Because I actually think there can be an aligned vision. And as the county executive, you have a microphone, you have the podium, you have a platform to say, hey, this is my vision for the schools. Like early childhood education is a priority. Addressing the inequities. Like we've got to be paying the teachers and principals more in our most vulnerable schools. We used to actually do that in Montgomery County. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore. So I'll put forth my priorities. They will. And I actually believe when there's full transparency and reasonable people, you'll more or less get to where you both need to be. But if there's not, right, if there's going to be a nickel over maintenance of effort, right, that's the state mandated amount. They want a nickel more than maintenance of effort. There's going to have to be a two-way street. And if I still can't get cooperation, we're going to start doing a line item budget. And actually, Montgomery County used to do this 20 years ago. Anne Arundel County does it. Prince George's County does it. We actually tell the school board, hey, you have this much for instructional salaries, this much for central office, so on. Because if you look at what's going on with our schools, for example, central office spend this year alone has jumped 14.5%. Like we've actually created a huge bureaucracy with our school system that needs to change. So actually, I'm going to start early. We have a vision, and hopefully, I won't need to use any kind of heavy-handed tactics. But I have those kind of in my back pocket if I need them.
Great. I'm going to ask another follow-up question to what we were talking about earlier, but then I think we are going to have some time for some Q&A from our participants. So I will just say to any of our board members that want to ask a question of David that you use the raise hand function, and that way Brian or I can call on you. So David, let's come back to transportation. Early on, you had, when we were talking about the American Legion Bridge 270 project, you had mentioned that you thought this was an area where there were opportunities to solve our transportation solutions with technology, perhaps. Can you expand on that for us? What ideas have you been considering now for transportation?
Sure, and I just want to make this clear. I'm not a transportation expert. Virtually everything that I say is I've plagiarized what someone else is either already doing around the country or here, or I've talked to experts. So these are my ideas. So for example, bus rapid transit is a great idea, but it needs to have dedicated lanes. No one's going to get out of their car and get onto a bus if they're sitting in the same traffic. And you can see that with what we've done on Route 29, right? The buses aren't full, because it's not a dedicated lane. I think we can fix that. I think we can actually put a dedicated lane south of New Hampshire Avenue to fix 29. They also need to be regional solutions. It makes no sense, like, for example, that on 29, that it stops at Burtonsville Crossing. Like, who's going to get in their car from Howard County, drive down to Burtonsville Crossing, park their car, and then jump on a bus? You're just going to keep driving, right? And so we need regional solutions. So when I think about, like, let's say 355, it's going to take decades for all the land to be redeveloped to dedicate a lane to bus rapid transit. But if we can make our roads more efficient, and there's something called adaptive traffic light signals, okay? And this isn't new. They've been doing it for almost 10 years now around the country. You just make the roads more efficient. And if we can make like something like 355 more efficient, then perhaps you can put in a dedicated lane for bus rapid transit so that you can get people moving. But just on the buses itself, and I said this 4 years ago, like ride-on should be free. And our county executive opposes that because it costs us so much money to run this and nobody uses it. We need to have better bus routes. They recently redid the bus routes in Houston, Texas, and ridership jumped 20% on the weekends. It was up 10% during the week. And so, because we haven't looked at just where the bus stops are here in decades, so we need to do that. But also investing in smaller buses. Every time you see one of those ride-on buses go by, you're looking between $1 million and $1.5 million to spend, right? And so there's other solutions that are, think like a 15-person passenger van, where you can have more point-to-point solutions rather than getting off the bus stop and having to walk a couple miles. So that's how I think about BRT. Is how I think about ride-on bus. Even our Marc train, right, is an underutilized asset that we don't talk about enough. But like right now, we have a problem in Germantown. Like literally, the parking lot is not big enough for people to park their cars so they can get on the Marc train. It'd be great to have midday Marc service, and that's gonna take leadership with the train CSX as well as our state officials, midday train service. And then ultimately, we need to have a Marc station at Shady Grove Metro, right? And that's in our master plan. And that would be a game changer, because then that really opens up a whole bunch of different options for commuters. So those are some of the things I think about from a transportation perspective.
Great, thank you for expanding on that. I'm scanning. I don't see any hands up, but I know Brian has something ready for us while the rest of you are thinking. So.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Blair. Brian Levine from the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to ask you something. There's been a number of climate related bills introduced at state level and the county level as well. I was wondering if you were concerned that it'll harm residential and or business construction if Montgomery County jumps ahead of other local jurisdictions on climate policy.
So thank you, Brian. And first, call me either Dave or David or Dummy. I generally respond pretty well to all three of those. So I am concerned about that, right? And I received the Sierra Club endorsement, and it was interesting. There's a couple issues that we really butted heads on and we debated. One was 495 and 270 because they're against it. I'm for it. But I think I got them to where they need to be. But this was the other one, which is like, I think we all would love, net zero buildings and all of this great stuff, the building performance, standards that they put in. But the challenge is it's just gonna be one more reason not to do business in Montgomery County. I was with the CEO of Southern Management earlier this year. Okay, they have 50,000 apartment units in the DMV. She has $250 million she wanted to invest. She goes, we considered Montgomery County, and then we're like, no way. It'll take us twice as long to get a project built. There's standards, it won't be as profitable. So we cannot be on the bleeding edge of this. As I think about our business, our buildings, let's start with our county-owned buildings, right? The government buildings, and let's push those to be net zero, right? If we're going to move forward with some of these standards, we need to make sure that we're providing the subsidies to the building owners. Otherwise, we're going to have a huge equity issue, because what's going to happen is they have to double pass this on and increase rents to probably the people that can least afford it. So I think this is a real challenge, and unfortunately, we see Montgomery County do this over and over again, where they get way out in front of the rest of the country, and then people are like, "Oh, no worries, I'll just build in Howard or Frederick or Northern Virginia."
Good morning, David. I'm going to jump in on that. First of all, it's really great to see you, and I'm glad that this worked out for your schedule today. It's great to see you, and it's wonderful to have a former board member running for this position. So that's exciting. One of the things that you and I have talked about is, and it tracks with this conversation, which is our competitiveness, our regional competitiveness, but also our national competitiveness, because we're in a competition with other regions around the nation. It's not just about Maryland versus Virginia, right? It's that the life sciences are national and global companies. And so we're competing with the world. Similarly, we're the home to tens of thousands of government contractors, federal government contractors, small businesses that do business directly with the federal government. And when they're competing for a contract, they're competing with companies from all over the United States. So whenever it becomes more difficult or more expensive for a Montgomery County-based business to do business, or the costs go up, it makes it harder for them to compete. And I just wanted to give you a chance to comment on that, because I know that you're very aware of that community, particularly that we are #1 in the nation for health IT companies that work directly with the federal government, because we're the home of HHS, FDA, NIH, that sort of thing. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's so all interconnected, and what I heard a lot is about just the affordability of Montgomery County, right? Our schools, because I remember when we were building our company and I would recruit executives from around the country. This is 20 years ago. They would say, I'd get a phone call a week later, like, "Oh my gosh, David, your public schools are better than our private schools here in wherever they were coming from." So they loved our school. So making sure we have a good school system, right, so we can attract people. The other thing is transportation. Going back a little bit to what we were talking about, if you don't have a good transportation system, right, then people can't literally get a workforce. And that's a huge problem for us. I was with the CEO of Adventist, and he's got to hire 600 nurses over the next 2 years. And he said the number one issue is there's not enough workforce housing. There's no housing. And so people are just, you can't have a labor force live here and there's no, transportation solutions, people leave. And so I think, so this is all very much connected. And I think those are the more challenging things. Because to your point, Gigi, it's very much, we're competing not just regionally, but nationally and internationally for these businesses and these jobs.
Thank you for that. I believe I saw our chair, Lowell Yoder's hand up just a moment ago. Lowell?
Yeah, I used the wrong icon, so apologies for that. But I did have a question about the energy environment, but I think you answered that. But I do have another one that's lurking in the back of my mind, and I know we're running up short on time. But I'm just curious. You're obviously very passionate. I can just hear it when you speak. Where does that come from? What would you say is your why or your underlying motivation or purpose to? Because you're investing a lot in this and have in the past. I'm just curious what your answer to that would be.
So it's home. It's home. So my parents live here. My wife and I are raising our kids here. I've been here my whole life, and it's killing me to see it slip. And the kind of an inflection point for me. I spent a lot of time in Montgomery Village when I was a kid growing up, and is where we had good friends. My parents would drop us off there. We'd walk to Lake Forest Mall, and then I probably went like 20 years without going there. And then I visited South Lakes Elementary School about 7 or 8 years ago. I was shocked. I couldn't believe what had happened in Montgomery County, that the pockets of poverty, the inequities with our schools. And so for me, I was either going to complain about it, move, or fix it. And I believe that my skill set that I kind of honed through my career is actually what the county needs. Like I believe that, obviously with passion, that we need an executive leader who can put the right people in place, who can set aspirational goals and hold them accountable. And so it's almost how I started, Lowell, with saying, it's about giving back, right? This is like a door opened up for me. I was blessed to grow up here because clearly generations before me made sacrifices to make our schools great and to invest in Montgomery County. And I'm very much now paying it forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't see any other hands out. Lowell, Mr. Chair, would you like to close us out here?
Well, first of all, David, thank you for spending time with us this morning. And obviously you're very familiar with the chamber, and appreciate all your efforts in the past. So thank you for your time and best of luck.
Well, and thank you. And I really appreciate you taking the time this morning to meet with me. I can tell you the polling is really encouraging, and it's an incredibly close race again between me and the incumbent. And so every vote matters. And so clearly I'd be grateful for your individual votes, or you could twist the arms of spouses or neighbors. That would be wonderful as well. So again, thank you. And I'm sure I'll see you all soon.
David, we want you to know that we have recorded, and that our plan is to post our recording, so we can share your remarks broadly.
Oh, wonderful, and we'll post it as well on our social media sites.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Councilmember Riemer, good morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Brian Levine from the Montgomery County Chamber. Let me hand it over to our chair, Lowell Yoder, to get you going.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Councilmember Riemer, thank you for joining Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce Board this morning for this County Executives Forum. We will make sure we stop promptly at 9:50, as we know you have a busy day ahead. To get things rolling, it is my pleasure to introduce Leslie Ford Weber, our immediate past chair and chair of the Chamber's Legislative Affairs Committee, to moderate the Q&A. Leslie.
Great. Hans, we have some questions that we prepared for each of the three candidates we're talking with this morning, so we will ask those first. And then if there's time available, we'll do some sort of free-form Q&A, perhaps from something you say that sparks someone's interest, or the burning questions that some of our board members might have. So just so you understand our format here. I'm actually going to start at the end. So, and that would be to ask you to talk a little bit about your vision for Montgomery County. And perhaps as you come out 4 years from now, if you're successful in this race and you're thinking about your legacy, how will you know you've been successful at implementing that vision?
Well, thank you, Leslie. Really appreciate the invitation to be with you this morning. And I love starting with that question because I think it's really the most important. It's the one that in some ways will probably show the biggest differences among candidates. But my vision for Montgomery County is a dynamic, thriving, complex cosmopolitan community that is creating opportunities, creating jobs, creating housing, that is a place where our kids have a future, that is renowned internationally for its contributions in life sciences and technology and innovation economy sectors, that is providing jobs for the community that pay a great living wage and allow us to raise families and live here with a strong sense of security and a strong spirit of community. And it's a place where you can afford to live and retire. It's a place where your kids are going to have all of the greatest opportunities for higher education, sports, culture, arts. It's a place where you have it all. And I think Montgomery County has so many of those elements. And what we're lacking today is a sense of forward momentum and a sense that we are actually growing the opportunities that we provide. And I think that is the result of a stagnant politics and a stagnant economy in many ways. You know the story better than most. The regional economic map has been rewritten. And what was once a region that centered around DC with suburbs now has multiple centers. And Northern Virginia has leveraged the federal investment in defense to create an economic engine that has generated so much momentum that now it's the place that companies just want to be. And we need to create our own momentum. And if we're successful, which I think we can be, I think we have the elements. We have to get a lot of policy issues right, but I think we have the elements to be successful. We're going to feel more confident that our kids have a future here, that this is a place that people can move to start a business or to work, or that they can stay here for their whole lives. So that is my vision. It is a dynamic, thriving, growing community that is creating more opportunities from generation to generation while fulfilling its progressive vision of social equity and climate action and social justice. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It was interesting to me. One of the things you didn't mention, because of where you've sat on the council for the last few years and some of the things you've tackled, was transportation in that discussion. And of course, one of our hot topics in our civic life right now is the American Legion Bridge 270, 495 project. For that one, the federal government is anticipated to issue its record of decision in early August. So we're wondering what your position is on this project. And I guess even if that decision comes down favorable, what would your reaction be? Would you support the federal government's position, or would you anticipate launching a challenge of that record of decision?
Well, great question. And yeah, I mean, I didn't get into a lot of how we create that future. And transportation is a big part of it. Education is a big part of it. So there are many important policies that we have to get right: housing, transportation, workforce, and higher ed. I am a supporter of the project. As you know, I have been. I've helped steer it through some very rocky waters. And I think the county needs it. We've got to be connected to Virginia. And I'm also a strong supporter of the Purple Line and public transportation. And the reality is there isn't a transit connection between Montgomery County and Dulles-Tysons. We have to be connected. If we're not connected, then we wither on the vine, and we don't want that. And so whether it's because you need to get to a meeting or you need to get to the airport or you work there, that you want to be able to have economic exchange and interaction with the region's biggest economy, our county has to be connected. So more than a year ago, I worked with the state to identify a path forward. And I think that path forward is to focus on building a new American Legion bridge that has more capacity and continuing that all the way up to 70 and all the way to Frederick. And so that's what I support. And my colleagues joined me in supporting that project and helping it to move forward. And we're moving forward now. And I'm optimistic that the federal government will support it. And then we're going to be able to keep moving forward with it. We're going to certainly need a governor who will be willing to move it forward as well. And I think the county executive can be very persuasive to the next governor, whoever that will be. So, it's really important for us to have somebody who has been part of making it happen, has provided public leadership. And I'll say, I'm the only candidate in the race who has provided any public leadership on this issue. You've got one candidate who has done everything possible to stop it, and another candidate who has stayed on the sidelines and not, running for office on a platform of providing bold leadership, has refused or abdicated the opportunity to provide leadership on one of the most important economic issues that we're facing. So, I know we need it, and I'm going to be part of moving it forward. And I'll just close by saying, as you also know, I negotiated an agreement with the state so that the revenue that comes out of the toll lanes, and of course there'll be 4 free lanes, but there'll be 2 toll lanes. The revenue that comes out of the 2 toll lanes in each direction will go to public transportation in Montgomery County. And we now have a very exciting transit line envisioned from Germantown all the way down 355, and then in Rockville down Veers Mill to Wheaton. It connects Montgomery College in Germantown all the way to downtown Wheaton. And that's going to be a significant advance for us. It's going to allow us to do a lot more transit-oriented development on Rockville Pike, and just better connect the county and bring Montgomery College closer to many communities in the region and the county. So we got a lot riding on this. I think it's going to really contribute to our economic success in the future.
I will set your pun aside about a lot riding on it, but we may come back to it in a few minutes.
That was not intentional, but
well done for early in the morning. We've talked about, you mentioned the economy and the lack of forward momentum. Certainly economic vitality is one of our chamber's strongest interests, and as well as, and part of that being the attraction and retention of our talented workforce being a #1 challenge. So you mentioned you hadn't had time to talk about specific policies creating that forward momentum. So what are some of the policies and initiatives you might implement as county executive to improve our economic vitality and our labor challenge and address our labor challenges?
Great. Well, there's no one single solution or magic bullet. I think folks often think that there's some economic development policy that an elected official can pull a rabbit out of a hat, and suddenly it's a combination of getting the important things right: housing, transportation, workforce. There's other issues that are less within our control, like taxes. And then there's some critical economic development strategies, incentives, and things like that. And if you get all of those right, then I think we will be able to generate the momentum that we need. So on housing, first of all, the county has to be affordable. A company has to feel that it can grow. The workforce has to be able to live here. And there are a lot of companies that have vacancies in Montgomery County, and they're trying to find that kind of middle band salary level worker. And that worker doesn't really have great options for where to live in the county. If you want to get a house in Montgomery County with enough bedrooms for a growing family, you are going to be paying a significant amount of money, and it's too much often for for the kind of employee that our companies need to be able to hire. So that is a real challenge for us. And if you look over the last couple, 2 decades, but especially the last 10 years, what you've seen is since the Great Recession, the housing production in the county dropped, and we haven't yet been able to get enough momentum going to get our housing numbers up. Over the last few years, I have worked with my colleagues at the council to make some significant changes in housing policy. We lifted the moratorium. We embraced the regional policy goal of 40,000 units in Montgomery County. We right-sized our housing taxes for new housing. We've passed a lot of zoning reforms. County Executive Marc Elrich has fought us on all of those, every one of those. And we're not going to be able to get the momentum we need without a stronger housing policy. We need a county executive who gets it and is willing to lean into that and make change. So that's job number one. Transportation is critical. We got to get the Purple Line done right. We have a county executive who proposed single tracking the Purple Line into downtown Bethesda. I think it's one of the worst ideas an elected official in Montgomery County has ever proposed. Fortunately, our state delegates helped us stop that. The governor didn't bite on it, but we got to get that Purple Line done right, because it connects the University of Maryland with 4 stops on the campus right into downtown Silver Spring and downtown Bethesda. And my vision, which I've been talking about for years, is to make the Purple Line corridor an innovation corridor where we can build quantum and other technology industries that want to be close to the University of Maryland, which is the country's largest computer science degree granting institution, and close to Bethesda and Silver Spring, where there's housing and there's restaurants and vibrancy in life. So I think we've got a huge opportunity with the Purple Line. Transportation, we got to get the 270 and bridge connection rebuilt so that we can have a reliable connection to Virginia. And we've got to have more transit in the up county. So we've got a lot of transportation needs. And if we get those right, that's going to be a big help. On workforce, we've got to get the state of Maryland to invest more in higher education in Montgomery County. We've got to have MCCC producing as they have been, but we've got to step it up and be more targeted and focused, producing the workforce that our companies need to grow and thrive here. So I've always been a champion of funding for MCCC, Montgomery College, and the universities at Shady Grove. This year in the budget, I created with my colleagues, especially with Craig Rice, we created a new institute at the universities at Shady Grove. It's called the Ready Institute. And it is a workforce pathways organization that's going to be working with kids from the youngest age to get a vision of what are the career opportunities here that they can get on that are tied in with where our growth is and where our needs are. And so we can have a more tight workforce pipeline, talent pipeline strategy. I think we need more of that, but ultimately we need the state to invest differently in Montgomery County. As you know, in Virginia, state of Virginia is going gangbusters with their higher education investments in Northern Virginia, GMU, Virginia Tech. We even have the University of Maryland has opened up an outpost in Virginia. We've got to get the state to transform, I believe, USG into more of a research university. We got to have a stronger presence there so that we can meet more than just the workforce needs of the county through USG, but actually also meet research and entrepreneurialism through basically breakthroughs that universities produce that are often driving economic progress. And if we have the University of Maryland on one side of the campus and USG and Montgomery College Institutes all working together there, then the next question is, how can we tie it all in with the NIH and NIST and NOAA and Department of Energy? We have so many federal research labs here. That's really our Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley. And I think there's just tremendous untapped potential for us to work with those labs and to partner with universities to create pathways for scientists who are there with their research on breakthroughs in medical and other fields to help companies here create partnerships, bring new therapies to the market, start new companies. I think we can do a lot more to leverage economic impact from our federal research presence, which again, Boston has had a renaissance from life sciences that is heavily university focused. I think we can have one that is heavily NIH and university focused. The NIH is already the engine firing our economy, but I think we could do a lot more. So, transportation, housing, workforce, partnerships with the federal labs. Then I think the kind of key ingredient here is livability. We need town centers or city centers up and down Rockville Pike and all along the Purple Line, where we have that walkable urban environment like the RB corridor. We need multiple Pike and Roses and Bethesdas all up and down the Red Line and along the Purple Line. And that will create that vibrancy that will really bring some glue for the workforce, provide a place for empty nesters who are, very often successful late career executives. We need everybody here, and we got to have a place for people to live. We got to have a high quality of life. So I think all those things kind of fit together, where the growth strategy that we need to create the housing is also a critical element of our economic success. And we need a county executive who's going to look at the whole red line corridor, and not just have a fantasy about one particular piece of property like the current county executive does, but actually really figure out how to get the private sector investing up and down the corridor around the metro stations, building the walkable, urbanized, transit-oriented future that our workforce wants and that our county needs.
Hans, I was struck as you were going through those ideas, how much of it is out of the control of the county executive? You've talked about the private sector investments, whether in housing or in real estate development, and talked about the federal government roles. So talk a little bit about, for us, your approach to being a collaborative leader and trying to bring other parties together when you don't control their decisions and their assets.
Well, that's a great question. I think you have to lay out the vision and provide people with a sort of a sense of purpose and motivation to work together towards a common goal. And I think the issues that I'm describing, for example, our ability to generate private sector investment up and down the red line, well, there is a lot that the county executive can do. As you may recall, the county council passed, the executive vetoed, and we overrode the veto for a tax incentive that I proposed that supports development on the metro stations there. We can continue to focus our efforts on streamlining permitting and building infrastructure around the red line corridor so that it's a better and more attractive environment for the private sector to make investments. I really come to this with a spirit of public-private partnership. That has always been an essential part of my vision for how leadership in Montgomery County should be. And whether that's working through organizations like the MCCC or BioHealth Innovation or Connected DMV, as you might recall, I took the lead to secure federal county funding for our federal biohealth, biowarfare and pandemic prevention center. And that has opened its doors in Twin Brook, and partly substantially there in Twin Brook because I negotiated funding with my colleagues that center is relying upon to open its doors. Now we've got a lot of work to do to get the federal funding that we're seeking for that enterprise. But I think there are so many incredible people who are working here. And what we need is a county executive who has an expansive vision and can pull together a great team. And we don't have that today. We have an executive without an expansive vision and without a great team. But I think we can pull that together and we can make these things happen. There's no question about that in my mind.
Great, thank you. Gigi, do you have a question for Hans?
Well, so many questions, and one of the things, and Hans, I just want to say straight up that you've always been incredibly responsive, and we've been able to work with you on any number of issues, and sometimes we agree and sometimes not, but your door's always been open. I just wanted to kudos on that. I think that should be acknowledged. There are so many things, one of the, I was glad to hear you make reference to federal presence. And yes, our competitors, our frenemies across the river have the Department of Defense, but we have HHS and NIH and FDA, and we have Hopkins, and we have amazing resources not only in Montgomery County but in what we call Metro Maryland, which is really from here to Baltimore, it's an hour's drive, but it's most of the state's assets and brain power and all sorts of things. And one of the issues that we have here, one of the opportunities is we have so many federal contractors, small businesses, small to mid-sized companies that are federal contractors, and we're number one in the nation for health IT firms, number two for all small businesses that sell directly to the federal government. So we're definitely in that space. The challenge that our companies in that space have is that they are in competition with companies not just from across the river, but across the nation. And, when it comes to life sciences, we're in a global competition for getting those firms to land here. And if we want government, federal contractors to land here, and stay here to build and expand their businesses, we have to keep in mind that when we make decisions, when the county council and the county executive put forward ideas or legislation that increases, those policy decisions can increase the cost of doing business for those companies, whether it's the energy tax, which, as we've always wanted to see that sunset and others that makes these companies that are located here, and they're great companies to work for because most of them are tech companies, great salaries, but it makes it harder for them to compete nationally. And so I feel like there's a conflict there in that our county council and our county executive not adopted policies adequately to consider the uncompetitive, the uneven field that's being created. And our county then, has to compete to keep these companies, and they have to compete nationally. So their costs of doing business matter. And so there is a built-in conflict between wanting to be, to expand there, but an unwillingness to remove some of the expenses that have been layered onto them. I'd like you to address what, as county executive, could you do working with the county council to reduce those kind of obstacles? And the same thing, frankly, goes for getting a building out of the ground. We didn't get a pharmaceutical recently. They located in Frederick, and it was just plain and simple. They can't get a building out of the ground fast enough here, and they've got things to do. So, as county executive, working with the county council, what would you do to address those competitive edge issues?
Great question. So first of all, we have to identify those critical investment opportunities that the private sector, that are kind of meaningful in the private sector, and make sure that there's a clear path. So you highlighted, for example, the time that it takes to get a lab project through our process in the county. And life sciences, this is like the moment we've been waiting for in life sciences. And I'm worried, first of all, that Marc Elrich is going to blow it. And secondly, that the county won't put in place enough policies to facilitate that private investment that is happening now in this moment. And we need to be able to guarantee that a developer that wants to do either a speculative life sciences project can get their building through the process in a very timely manner, 6 months or less. And we can't really ensure that today. And so that's really a problem. And I think we've got to actually put a policy in place that allows speculative life sciences development to happen now. And we don't have that. So first of all, that's one thing I would like to do on day one, during the transition, and possibly even have it ready to be acted upon on day one, is addressing a lot of those development process restrictions and really focusing all hands on deck with life sciences investment so that we can have a concrete, certain timeline, and our private sector partners can proceed with those. Then as far as general cost issues, you're absolutely right. I mean, so on the one hand, that's a good example of why I was skeptical and the county council rejected the proposed tax increase that Marc Elrich sent to us in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. Just didn't really feel like, that was an appropriate increase, wasn't necessary. And, he fought that, but we did not approve that. I think at the end of the day, we always have to be mindful of those costs because Montgomery County is a high cost jurisdiction, and we need incentives that are sufficient to overcome that. And you probably know ours typically haven't been. The combination of state and county incentives have not been high enough. And when you look at Virginia, what they do, they have a lower cost environment and they have higher incentives. And it's pretty hard to compete if you're not offsetting that advantage. So I think the county has to have a much more aggressive incentive strategy to be able to compete, particularly with Virginia, in attracting companies. And what I'd like to see us do is really go, pretty hard on that and start to build that density of companies that are willing to locate here so we can get that kind of natural gravity. So that's kind of a 10-year strategy that I think can really work. But at the end of the day, we also have to offer value. I mean, Boston is a high cost jurisdiction. California is a high cost jurisdiction. They're able to generate economic progress because even though they have high costs, they also have great value. And a company knows that there's more upside than downside. And I think that's where we have to do a better job supporting the workforce needs of our companies here so that they know that they can grow here. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be workforce that's going to allow a company to say, all things considered, this is still where I need to be. And so, I think we can do much better on that. It's why I've been so aggressive about building organizations like the Kid Museum, for example. It's why I work so hard to get the Ready Institute, because I think at the end of the day, it's talent that sets you apart. And for the sectors that we want to grow, we are one of the best places to find talent. And as a lot of our life science executives say, we're actually cheaper than Boston. We're actually cheaper than California. So having said that, we have to be mindful of our competitive position relative to Virginia, because the last thing in the world we want is for Virginia to take that industry, life sciences, which of course they would love to be able to do, and they in some sense are doing. So that's red alert here. But bottom line, we always have to be mindful about costs. And I hear what you're saying. I've been, I think, quite fiscally restrained in my work at the council over the years. And I've taken a lot of tough votes on spending initiatives to keep them sustainable. And, as county executive, I'm going to keep doing that.
Mr. Chair, do you have a question for us, or want to close us out here?
Yeah, I think we're running right up on our time, actually. So, so thank you, Hans, for taking the time. I know you spent a lot of time with us over the years, so greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you for your time, and best of luck.
Thank you. Well, I'll just leave you with the comment. We need an executive who can provide the political leadership for our community to help us embrace the growth and the progress and change that we need. And you're going to need somebody who knows how to navigate the challenges of our community and has the political experience, knowing how issues are going to play and who says what and how real, this objection is versus that objection. And that's what I bring to the table. I have a strong vision of economic development, but I also have the political experience and I have the credentials with the community to help move forward on some really challenging conversations. So I hope I can earn your support, and I look forward to partnering with you in the future. I know the chamber's not endorsing, but I'm speaking just sort of individually. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thanks, Hans.
Okay, bye everybody. Thanks.
Okay, board members, I'm letting Debbie in. Let's see here. Hi, Debbie. I see you on. This is Brian from the Montgomery County Chamber. Is that County Executive Elrich? Good morning, County Executive.
How are you?
All right, let's get this going. I hand it over to our board chair, Lowell Yoder.
County Executive Elrich, thank you for joining Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce Board this morning for this County Executive Forum. We will make sure we start promptly at 10:25, as we know you have a very busy day ahead. But to get things rolling, it is my pleasure to introduce Leslie Ford Weber, our immediate past chair and chair of the Chamber's Legislative Affairs Committee, to moderate the Q&A. Leslie.
Great, good morning. Mark, we have questions that we have asked of all the candidates we've been speaking with this morning, and we will go through those first, and then if there's some time available, we may ask to ask you to expand on something you will have said, or to ask one of our board members if they have another question. So just so you have a feel for how we're moving along. Our first question is really almost asking you to look out towards the end. I'm sure that when we talked to you 4 years ago, that a global pandemic wasn't in your line of vision. And so as we look out to the next 4 years, understanding that we've all learned we don't know what we don't know is there, what do you think your goals are for a second term? At the end of that second term, which will have been 8 years in office, you know, do you have a feel for what you'd like your legacy to be? How will you know that you've succeeded?
So that's a good question, and I think there are probably lots of things bundled up in that. You know, one part of it, an easy part of it, well, relatively easy, is I think we've got to build the transportation network out, and I think we're better prepared to do that than ever before. We're, you know, now at the point we're submitting to the feds for BRT support, and we are going to be able to do this. And I think that's critically important because transportation, and particularly the lack of a good bus system, has been one of the impediments to economic development. In Virginia, you know, basically ate our lunch between the Silver Line and every jurisdiction in Virginia actually implementing real BRT. The county is, you know, actually fallen farther behind. When I introduced this concept, like 13 years ago or 14 years ago, the goal was to get ahead of Virginia, and we just weren't able to do that. And it goes back to, you know, I hope later we can talk about tax policy, but, you know, we have one tax policy in Montgomery County that's really an impediment to economic development, and I'm very interested in basically using the Virginia model for development taxation that they use in Tyson's, they use in Potomac Yards and places like that to help drive our ability to finance infrastructure in Montgomery County. But this is a doable. I think, you know, that you're going to see an explosion in life sciences, and I think we've set the stage for that. We've made major changes in how we process things in permitting, and we continue to evolve. We just had a meeting yesterday with some of the large developers and CBRE, and we brought in WSSC, and we asked for WSSC to finally give us an ombudsperson, so when a project gets stuck, the developer has a place to go. Having the same conversations with Pepco and with Washington Gas to make sure that at the end of the day, when everything's ready to move, and the last thing is you haven't gotten the sign off from these three agencies, that they actually have a contact that we can use, and that contact will make sure that projects move through in a priority way. And this is something we haven't been able to deliver before, but they've sat down with us. I've already talked to folks at Pepco, and they want to help move us in that direction. And so they're talking about what they can do in order to make it possible to work with people building projects, make sure they're handled expeditiously. It's helped us. The changes we made already have helped us bring companies into the county. Some of the large companies asked us about how long it was going to take to get things through our permitting department. We were able to deliver on time and in a way where we were cooperative. It's a very different attitude now between kind of an adversarial, we got you approach, to more of how do we help you get this project approved. And, you know, the folks over there are making this more of a mission-driven department, and I'm really happy to see that, because I think life science is going to come here in spades. I think, you know, I've had this 2-year discussion with WMATA. They ended up asking JLL for the highest and best use of the White Flint Metro Station. They came back and said, highest and best use is life sciences. And we've been working also with CBRE and getting similar feedback from them, where this region is the second highest concentration of life sciences talent in the entire country. The only place that has more talent packed in is Boston. And when you think about all the universities clustered in Boston, it's not hard to understand why. But we're right behind Boston, and we think we're going to keep growing this. And I think we have absolutely awesome opportunities to do this. When I came into office, there was no lab space being built. I was in a meeting with Shear Partners and the state where Shear was bemoaning the inability to bring lab here. Now we've got like 4 million square feet of lab, either under development or in the planning process. And we've streamlined the lab process so they don't have to have a tenant before they go through the approval process. They can be approved without having a tenant. And that's going to be exciting because labs help drive interest in life sciences life science companies coming here. So I think we're building a strong symbiotic relationship. Our relationship with the University of Maryland. I got the first agreement from the university system to actually bring graduate level research to Montgomery County. They have never done that before. And I spent, again, things take time. I spent 2 years meeting with the system and using Amazon as an example of, you know, we outbid Arlington for Amazon, But what Amazon wanted wasn't money. They wanted the flow of IT talent that would be at their doorstep. And so what Virginia offered was, moving UVA and a presence from George Mason next to the Amazon campus, not telling them they could take a bus ride to George Mason and UVA. That investment is what really brought Amazon there and caught Amazon's attention. And I've pointed out to Maryland that in Virginia, the university system plays much more of a role as an economic driver in that state than the university plays in Maryland and frankly in Montgomery County. So out of that, the University of Maryland's proposed building an artificial intelligence big data center institution actually at the White Flint Metro. It would be focused on supporting life sciences, but also hospitality. They'd had a request from Marriott and Choice to use Maryland's AI and life sciences to help design things for them. And Maryland's going to park that over at White Flint. And it'll help those two industries, and it'll help our, kind of nascent artificial intelligence industry that is growing in Montgomery County. And I'm very confident that once we've got a university center there with grad students, we're going to find other companies lining up to be close to those grad students and giving them opportunities to work and to join companies. And obviously, the university, if they follow the UMBC model, will help people graduating spin-off companies. So I think that partnership is going to be a game changer for Montgomery County. And I think the development of White Flint as a life sciences center on the metro is going to be a game changer. We've been approached by all of the major life sciences developers. I don't mean companies, I mean the companies like in Alexandria, which brings companies in and basically takes a large stake in developing life sciences. We know that people are lining up to bid on what will be the request for a master developer for White Flint focused on life sciences. And they're the kind of people we want to be lining up for this. So I believe that you're going to see a much more vibrant and economically successful county that's going to be able to bring jobs here. We already have literally thousands of new jobs coming here just from some of the big developments. We just tentatively made an agreement with another company yesterday for something that looks like 500 jobs. We're doing work with United Therapeutics in Silver Spring. That'll yield 1,000 jobs. So we're continuing to do what we can to make sure we bring the companies and the higher quality jobs here. At the same time, I think we're making progress on equity. I think we learned a lot from COVID, and it's changed our approach to public health. We're going to be much more involved, and we're going to be working with the hospital systems to make sure we have an integrated approach from the clinics all the way up to the hospitals, because none of us benefits from the kind of fractured healthcare system that we have right now. And I'm excited about that. I think that we see much more intentionality in programming in the county. There's much more awareness of who benefits from programs, and are we serving the least among us and not just the noisiest among us. And that's important. If we're going to have an equitable approach, we've got to make sure we lift everybody up in the county. We've made major changes in WorkSource Montgomery. One of the first things I did, and the council agreed, was basically dismantle the old WorkSource program, which basically produced no employees and did nothing for low-income people in this county. And Anthony Featherstone is, I think, kind of a genius, and has really driven that to the point where they're actually serving hundreds and hundreds of people and getting them trained up for higher skilled jobs. And I will say, I think also Ash Shetty has been a real breath of fresh air in procurement. We now have a local preference for small businesses. We give points, we give pricing. We just expanded the number of companies that can compete to be selected for our IT contracts. We used to have 8 companies that were selected. We're now going to 12 companies that'll be selected with the LCATs. For those of you who know that, we're going to go to requirement for 50% of that business be local from the 15 to 18% that it's been in the past. And I think you'll find the transparency in our procurement department we've never had before. So I think there are lots of things that are going to make this county more successful, that are going to allow us to make the kind of investments we need to make to keep ourselves growing. You know, Virginia has gotten where it has by making major investments in transportation. And we think, you know, we're going to be able to begin to approach the kind of work that they've been doing. So I'm optimistic about where this county is. We started this budget year, for the first time ever, we made our reserve requirement. And we did that despite coming out of COVID. There is no federal money supporting this year's budget. Last year we had 172 million. We were like every other place in the country. We were able to build a budget that was bigger than last year's budget with no federal money in this budget. We put record amounts of money in the schools, 149 million over last year, so they could deal with learning loss and also have to deal with the requirements they have to raise teacher pay that come out of the blueprint for Maryland. And we think, you know, we're going to be able to continue to be successful funding schools. Our affordable housing is 2.5 times what we put in affordable housing before. This is the first budget again where we had the ability to do that. We've got a special fund for nonprofits that can help them exercise the right of first refusal. They were often stymied by their ability to actually put together financing packages in the time frame that you have to exercise that right. And this $40 million will be available to them so they can exercise the right and then put together their long-term financing once they've secured the property. And on top of that, we have $100 million in there for construction assistance in general. And we've got some major projects, you know, underway. We've got a large one on Bushy Drive off of Veers Mill Road. I put 18 properties on the block for sale. We received 130 proposals for those properties, which means we're going to be able to pick from a very robust group of proposals, projects that deliver very high percentages of affordable housing. We're looking basically at housing that serves people from about a $30,000 income up to $110,000 income. Because oddly enough, people even making 100,000 couldn't find an apartment in Bethesda if they wanted to, particularly if they wanted a 2-bedroom apartment. They won't qualify for any of the new apartments. So we're looking at what we can do to actually aggressively, you know, build affordable housing in the county. We're working with companies that have different manufacturing techniques. We're following their progress and bringing things to market that we think might allow us to reduce the cost of construction, which would allow us to build more units for the same amount of dollars that we invest. So lastly, I'll say unemployment is where it was pre-pandemic. We hit 3%. That is lower than we were before the pandemic hit us. And so we're in a much stronger place. I think, you know, we've got a good economy. We have a good effective budget. And I just don't see anything but signs of growth right now.
You actually opened talking about transportation, so let's come back to that for a second. You said if there was time, you wanted to talk about a tax policy that was an impediment. So what is that, and what are your ideas for changing it?
So Montgomery County, JLL did a study for us, and they did a comparative study of all the commercial tax rates in the DC region. And what they came back with is Montgomery County is the cheapest state in the entire DC region. Our taxes are lower than anybody around us. And on commercial property, DC tops out at $1.85. Fairfax County tops out a little over $1.65. We're at 99 cents. So, you know, the question you have to ask yourself is, if you're the lowest priced in terms of taxes and you've got 10 million square feet of vacant space, why isn't anybody coming here? And, you know, I've argued for a long time that it's not density that brings people here. It's like you have to have a reason to come here, and you got to have a tax structure that's more effective and actually can produce the infrastructure. When I talk with the supervisors in Virginia, they say their ability to tell somebody if we're going to build the Silver Line, barring construction incompetence, they can deliver a project on time. And so a developer knows when they build that they're going to get a project, that it's going to benefit them, that their money they pay the county is really invested into things that they need. And that's the value of the special taxing districts that Virginia uses. And years ago, Steve Kaufman, who you all know, came to me and said, you guys ought to really look at using special taxing districts. And there was no real interest in it. And I continued to poke around, and what we realized, partly coming out of this study, was that everything we do is less expensive than Virginia, except for one thing, and that's the impact tax. And Virginia doesn't have an impact tax. And what the impact tax does, it sits at the front of a project. It has to be financed generally. You either need to bring in another equity partner or you need to finance it. You're financing more than you would for the same building. If you assume labor and materials are roughly equal, adding that impact tax makes any Montgomery County project more expensive than the same project would cost in Virginia. And of course, with the larger impact tax and the load that you're now financing, you need higher rents, which make your rents less competitive. You need you've got to recover, to make your ROI. Now your ROI just isn't on your project. Now it's on this tax, which is loaded in the front. And our conclusion is, and like I said, I've talked with the supervisors in Virginia, is to basically bag the impact tax and focus on the development district taxes, which would be created for particular districts, for specific projects. The Virginia tax does not go to the general fund. It only goes to build things that you tell people you're going to build, like things in a master plan. And it enables them to deliver something to a developer for the money they give them. The worst part about the impact tax, other than what I just described, is that because the impact tax can't fund the project, you're not going to build a BRT line because somebody builds, an apartment building in Bethesda or one building goes up. It doesn't provide you a source of revenue to do that, and it's a one-time payment. That's a real handicap. But that money then goes into a fund, which is the impact tax fund, and it gets used for the first project that comes along where we can actually use that money. So there's no guarantee that a developer is going to see a dime of the money that they paid in impact taxes come back to produce projects in the area where the money came from. And that's the difference with Virginia's tax system. That whole back-end tax on the special taxing districts is only predicated on projects that are going to be delivered to the district. And so your money becomes an investment in infrastructure that benefits the businesses, as opposed to a pile of money that goes somewhere in the county to do some project at some time that may or may not have anything to do with you. And I've talked with BF Saul, I've talked with Alan Gottlieb, I've talked with a ton of developers, and all of them will tell you they feel the same way about about our impact tax, that if we were to do what Virginia does, which they're used to, remember, everybody who talks about building in Virginia, they're building in Virginia in their special taxing districts. It is a more equitable way of taxing. It is better for the county because you get a stream of revenue over the life of the projects you're financing. I can take a bond out based on the stream of revenue, which I can't do with an impact tax. So it liberates us to build the stuff that people want to see. It reduces the upfront burden on the developer. It makes their rents more competitive with Virginia, and just all around, it would be a vast improvement over the structures that we have today. And if you don't believe me, go give Steve a call and he'll tell you the same thing. I do listen when I talk to people.
Well, thank you for explaining that. It'll be interesting to see. That's a big decision, a big structural change. And, if you're successful in this campaign, we'll look forward to having further conversations about that. I said I had two questions about transportation. The next one is, you are well recognized for your opposition to the way the governor structured the American Legion project, the toll lanes, the 270, 495 widening seems to be on the set aside for now, but that other project is still underway. And there's a record of decision anticipated from the federal government in early August. Tell us a little what your current thinking is about this project, and anticipating that record. If it's favorable to the project, will you continue your opposition, or will you start taking another tactic towards this project?
I'll get to what I'm going to do. I just want to clarify a couple of things for people. I know many of you were at that first breakfast that the county was the State of Montgomery breakfast in December. And I was there, I think 2 or 3 days after I had just been inaugurated. And when I got to the podium, I said to the governor, because we're not talking about the American Legion Bridge then. I said, if you're serious about solving this bottleneck, you'd start at the American Legion Bridge. So I want to make this clear. I have no problem with starting at the American Legion Bridge. And despite my disagreement with the governor, I always gave him credit for trying to tackle what has been a really difficult problem in the county. I didn't agree with some of the decisions he made and how he would go about tackling it, but I thought he opened up the door to trying to figure out a way to provide some relief in this corridor. As we were negotiating with Greg Slater before the council, 5 members of the council, in darkness, frankly, because they got cited for not having any public meeting to do this, undermined us. We were working with the state. And, you know, our goal was, and my goal was basically with the letter that the council signed on to, was to get the state to do the reversible lanes on the part of the 270 that goes down to the spur and over to 495 on the western side. And there is no reason we couldn't do that. There are a couple of easy ways to add either 2 reversibles, or if you insist, 2 dedicated lanes to that road on the 270 portion without doing any major construction. No matter what you do, you have to pull out the bridges. You have to make clear span bridges instead of bridges that are supported in the middle or supported where that service lane is. And if you take out the service lane and you take out the lane next to the dividing wall, you get 2 lanes right away. And I don't mean take out the service lane. I mean take out the wall that separates the service lane from the general lanes. You can fit in 2 lanes in both directions tomorrow. And you'd have to deal with the bridge abutments because the bridges are a problem, but they were going to be removing the bridges anyway. So that would be the large cost that would remain. But the cost of all the crazy flyovers and everything else would be gone, and you would get a much better system on I-270. And I talked with Greg Slater, and he did not dispute that that it wouldn't work to use the reversible lanes. That just wasn't the direction the governor wanted to go in. I also was arguing not to stop at the ICC, that the project should be a consolidated project that goes from Frederick all the way down to the bridge. Because if it stops at the ICC, people north of the ICC are going to have a hellacious time until they get to the ICC. And when you're going north in the morning and all those lanes collapse to the current lane configuration, you're going to have a northbound disaster on 495. And that's just the fact, and it's what the traffic studies show. And so my role was to try to get the state to agree to do this as a unified project from top to bottom. At the present state, it is going to be 5 to 10 years before they get around to the northern part of I-270, and I just think that's wrong. So you asked me what I'm going to do immediately. First, with a new governor, which I hope is a Democrat, but I hope if it's not a Democrat, since if it's Kelly Schultz, I think we have a reasonable chance of having somebody we can talk to. There's no reason not to go for federal money. I do not understand why the governor refused to ask for federal money for the bridge, because nobody expects to get all of it, but we got half of the cost of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge from the federal government. The federal government's got gobs of money sitting in a fund that's meant for infrastructure projects exactly like this one. And in my opinion, what the governor's tried to do is build the most expensive project possible so he can say, I've built the most expensive project possible. And basically all those costs are going to get pushed on to Montgomery County taxpayers and anybody else who's using this road, because the federal money would greatly reduce the cost of the project to people. And doing reversibles, particularly on 270, would greatly reduce the cost of this project to people. You would get all the efficacy with much less cost, and it would possibly be able to be done without tolls at all. You know, it's not clear that the state couldn't fund this if they were more prudent about how they designed the project. So I'm going to work with whoever's the next governor to talk about what can we do to bring this project into a budget that achieves your transportation goals, but also does it in a way that doesn't overly burden taxpayers and users of the road. the tolls on that road at rush hour are going to be extraordinary. And they're designed to be extraordinary because they don't want people using those lanes, because otherwise they'll be crowded and you're not going to pay for being crowded, which means everybody else's lanes have to be miserable. And you have to be miserable to want to pay that much money to get out of those lanes. So we need a different, I think, mental approach to this. I think, we'll work with the next, governor. I've talked with all the Democratic candidates about that. And even Peter's talked about being willing to look at how we go about approaching the project, which as opposed to rolling the project back. I never said not to add capacity. I was always focused on trying to minimize the costs to make sure the project was effective. And I think we can do that going forward. And I think if Slater had had his way, well, Greg Slater was the secretary, if he had had his way, we would have had a modified project that would have been able to address the concerns that people had. I suggested 2 ways of dealing with the West Beltway to provide the lanes they need over there. And when I told him what I was suggesting, he said, those are the things that the 2 alternate bidders actually proposed. So I knew that I'm not completely out of line in suggesting there are other ways to do that without pushing the boundaries of the road. And I'll continue to work with whoever the governor is to get this done. But I'm really going to emphasize, we've got to try to get some federal money in this project. I think that's just a huge mistake not to try to bring that money into the project. But I will not, I don't see this as going to a court case. I see this as trying to work with people to, the new governor is going to have new ideas and hopefully not be running for president. And so we can focus on how do we solve the problem. And I will be a partner in that.
I know we're coming close on our time, and that I'm sure you have an incredibly busy day. Lowell, can I ask you as chair if there's any burning questions you have, or if not, then if you want to close us out. You're muted still, Lowell, sorry.
You know what? I got to do that every day or it's not a Zoom day for me. So apologies. But yeah, I think we're right up on our time. So thank you, County Executive Elrich, for spending some time with us today and giving us your vision. So best of luck and thank you again.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we'd had a chance to talk about schools and things like that, but at least I hope you walk away from this understanding that I'm trying to move this county forward. And, COVID was a real impediment to doing things. Not having revenue was a real impediment to, moving a budget forward. I think some of the candidates don't understand the relationship between the county executive and the county council. And the council is the one with the ultimate budget authority. And the council is the one that has said that we've spent the last 2 years, other than this year, in the same services budget. So there are a lot of things I would have liked to have done that COVID didn't allow us to do and that our budget resources didn't allow us to do. But I think that you see in the budget that we produced this year, what I think the future is going to look like, because again, there was no tax increases to make this budget possible. This is money that the county is finally beginning to generate. And the state says this is our new baseline. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to build on this going forward.
And actually, Marc, I just wanted to chime in and say that I wanted to, just to say on record that when we reached out to you and to members of your team, they've always been very responsive. And I appreciate you keeping the door. There's always been a dialogue, and your team's been proactive in reaching out. I appreciate that. So I know we all do. So I wanted to thank you again for joining us today. There's so much more to talk about, but we know that you're on a tight schedule as well. And we wanted to be sure you knew we appreciated your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gigi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.